Before you lose your soul, answer this. When did you last sit alone and hear the quiet refuse to flatter you, and why did you decide to drown it with noise and speed? You tell yourself you are busy, but you are mostly avoiding the trial of truth, the small tribunal that convenes in the dark when the phone is finally asleep. Dostoevsky would smile sadly at your distractions, because he knew that comfort can be a velvet coffin and boredom the lid you close with your own hand. Kierkegaard warned of the crowd for a reason, not because bodies are evil, but because the crowd absolves you from deciding who you are when the hour is late. Jung would whisper that the shadow you refuse is the bill you never pay, until one evening it arrives itemized with interest and your name written twice. You curate an image like a saint polishes relics, yet you neglect the living blood of conscience, which wants less polish and far more honest heat. The world tells you to optimize, but your soul does not want efficiency. It wants meaning, which is clumsy, costly, and cannot be streamlined without dying. Tell me, traveler, whose script are you reading from when you speak so cleanly, and who profits when your truth sounds suspiciously like an advertisement? You keep promises to deadlines and break promises to your depths, and the betrayal accumulates quietly, like frost inside a locked and cheerful house. Pain arrives as a teacher with dirty boots, and you try to show it the door, yet it sits at your table until you finally ask what lesson it carried here. Freedom without interiority is a counterfeit bill. It buys nothing that satisfies, and the cashier of time returns it with a knowing, patient smile. There is a hunger under your preferences, and no menu can list it. It is the appetite for a life that costs you something you cannot return for store credit. Listen, the future is bargaining even now, offering you glitter for hours, but your soul is negotiating for wonder, and it never accepts the cheap rate. You were not born to be a notification animal. You were born to wrestle angels and your own name, and to limp honestly rather than sprint dishonestly. Every day you choose between anesthesia and awareness. One makes the morning painless, the other makes the night meaningful, and both send a bill. If you feel restless, do not pathologize it. It may be your buried self banging on the bookshelf, begging to be opened before mildew does the editing. Do not mistake cynicism for wisdom. It is only hope with a broken back, and it cannot carry you across the river where your courage is waiting. Your secrets already know your address. They will keep arriving until welcomed, and the welcome itself will soften them into servants rather than guards. If you are afraid, good. Fear is a compass here, pointing to the room you keep locked, where your unlived life is humming like a patient machine. So before you lose your soul, lose your excuses. Take this evening like a shovel to the frozen ground and see what roots were waiting for your hands. I want you to imagine a small underground room where your neglected truths meet at midnight, and the chair reserved for you has been empty for months. In that room, Dostoevsky keeps the minutes, recording every avoidance gently, because he understands how mercy walks with judgment like an older sister. Kierkegaard brings a bell and rings it whenever you repeat the crowd's lines, and each ring asks whether you prefer applause to the labor of choosing. Jung sketches your shadow on the wall and asks you to trace it, not to shame you, but to hand you back the keys to a house you have not entered in years. You say there is no time, but you gave hours to strangers online and they thanked you with dopamine. Your depths, unconsulted, gave only their silence. There is a pattern to your escapes: urgency, a little outrage, a choreographed debate. It feels alive but leaves you emptier, like smoke after fireworks. The self does not grow by consensus, it grows by covenant, a vow made privately and renewed when no one is counting, especially when you wish to stop. Consider how you edit your story to remove the difficult chapters and realize the hero's spine strengthens precisely where the book almost fell apart. When you envy other lives, notice the missing footnotes. They paid in currency you refuse to carry, and that refusal keeps you poor in real experience. The most dangerous lie you tell is the reasonable one, that you will begin when things calm down, as if the sea grants stillness to ships without anchors. Add up your postponed beginnings like unpaid taxes, and you will see why the auditor of regret has been pacing outside your door at dawn. There is no distant perfect when the present imperfect is unlived. The only doorway sturdy enough is the rough wood in front of you waiting for hands. If you want a path, walk. If you want a sign, choose. If you want a mentor, practice. These are the spells that turn fog into ground, step by faithful step. Let this not be grand theory but proximate action. A call, a journal page, a confession, a boundary, a promise kept alone where no camera can help you. We keep the loop open here. If you accept this room, the meeting continues, and the minutes become memory, and memory becomes a map you can trust. Picture a staircase that descends as you ascend, paradox on purpose, because depth is height inverted, and your pride dislikes such architectural jokes. You will pass portraits labeled habit, comfort, and image, and each will try to sell you the frame rather than the view that asks for your unarmored gaze. On the landing stands responsibility, not a tyrant but a gardener, offering you pruning shears and a question: what must be cut for your fruit to exist? You may call this moralism, but it is actually design talk. Every yes hides 1,000 no's, and pretending otherwise is why your calendar has a limp. Consider how the algorithm memorizes your hunger better than you do, and how you hire it as your shepherd. Then complain softly about the pasture. There are gates here named limitation, and beyond them live talents you never met. Limitation is not cruelty. It is the riverbank that lets you swim. When you let fatigue vote, it always elects distraction. When you let devotion vote, it elects discipline, and discipline funds freedom at scale. Do not wait for motivation. It is a fair weather friend. Build habit like a winter cabin, sturdy, unglamorous, and warm enough to shelter your mornings. Your attention is a tithing you cannot avoid. You will tithe to nonsense or to necessity, and the receipts will either shame you or save you at night. Think of patience as interest-bearing time. It multiplies quietly when invested, and panic spends it like a tourist with a free drink wristband. Yes, you will be mocked by people who outsource their courage. Let their laughter be the toll you pay to cross the bridge toward your difficult good. Notice how your body tells the truth when your mouth will not. Shoulders rise, breath shortens, and a headache votes no on the meeting you just accepted. To be honest is to be efficient in the deepest sense. Lies require maintenance crews, while truth, once planted, irrigates the land without invoices. You will not drift into a worthwhile life. Drift is how we end up on rocks, and worthwhile is how we row together against weather that keeps changing. Keep climbing, even as the stairs protest, because the protest is proof you have found the right floor, and the right floor always knocks from below. Let us talk about love, not the cinematic version, but the archaeology of care, where daily dusting proves more than seasonal fireworks ever could. Real love asks for presence over performance, for the dignity of attention over the theater of affection, and that reversal already saves two hearts. If you cannot sit silently with someone, you cannot speak truly with them. Silence is the rehearsal for truth, and truth hates unprepared stages. You romanticize intensity because it spares you from consistency, yet the soul measures devotion in Tuesdays, not in declarations under meteor showers. Bring your shadow to the table with your partner, because partnership without shadow work is a pact between masks, and masks make poor guardians. Your friendships deserve boundaries that do not tremble at disapproval, because loyalty without truth is only flattery in a borrowed uniform. Apologies are not receipts for instant forgiveness. They are seeds, and seeds demand seasons. Rushing love is how we bruise it and call the bruise fate. Learn to differ without despising. If contempt enters the room, wisdom leaves discreetly, and the conversation turns into a court without a judge. Many of your conflicts are solvable at the level of sleep, water, and honesty about fear. You keep negotiating theology when hydration would help. Do not turn people into projects. Fixers often fear their own renovation, and service without humility is just control in a philanthropic hat. Remember, intimacy is attention plus time plus truth. Remove any element and the equation collapses, no matter how pretty the caption appears. Let tenderness be your method of strength, because gentleness is not weakness. It is force under discipline, directed by reverence rather than rage. Practice gratitude publicly and repair privately. The first honors gifts, the second honors wounds, and both make a home where souls can finally unclench. Let this paragraph end with a small human question woven into the path. Are you finding yourself in these lines? And is any of this helping yet? Hold that answer quietly as we continue. Because what rises in you now will guide the next turn, and the next turn is almost ready to be taken. Ambition, when unexamined, is a treadmill disguised as a throne, and you learn its trick only when your crown keeps slipping at midnight. You chase titles like lanterns in fog, brighter from afar, dimmer in hand, and the dimness whispers that your hands were meant for warmer work. Success without self is a rental suit, tailored to impress a room that forgets you by dessert, while your soul waits outside without a coat. Dostoevsky's underground man would recognize your polished resentment, the ache of wanting to be seen without daring to be known. You network like a diplomat and negotiate like a merchant, yet refuse the one contract that matters, vows with your deepest capacities. The applause feels like rain after drought, but soon you notice it is salt water, and thirst returns hungrier, asking you to rename the weather. You perform competence so meticulously that actual mastery begins to feel threatening, because mastery requires apprenticeship to difficulty. There is a version of you that can bear the cost of honesty, and it waits in the workshop where your excuses are not allowed to bring coffee. When you measure your days only by output, you forget that truth matures as slowly as orchards, and impatient farmers uproot their future. Picture yourself as steward rather than star, custodian rather than celebrity, and watch how the work deepens even as the spotlight cools. The world sells shortcuts packaged as innovation, but each detour taxes you in courage, and the invoice always finds your softest hour. If your ladder leans on the wrong wall, climbing faster is not strategy. It is panic with good branding and an expensive gym membership. Ask the question no dashboard can answer. What would you build if admiration were delayed for a decade and integrity paid daily interest? Let your craft become a chapel where repetition is reverence and imperfection is the hymn that keeps your humility in tune. Hold that image as we move, because the next descent reveals the teacher you keep avoiding, and it is wearing your face like a mirror. Suffering arrives not as punishment, but as curriculum, the rigorous syllabus for a course in unflinching intimacy with reality. You do not need to love pain, only to listen when it knocks with muddy hands and insists on rearranging your furniture of assumptions. The crime and punishment are often internal, a betrayal of your values followed by a sentence of subtle self-contempt, served in silence. Confession is not a courtroom but a clinic, and the physician cannot help while you keep wearing armor that hides the wound from breath. Guilt becomes corrosive when hoarded, but becomes guidance when shared, turning shame into compost and compost into unexpected gardens. Kierkegaard would say, despair is a sickness unto death, cured only by choosing the self that chooses truth, even when truth ruins dinner. Jung would add that your unlived life will sabotage your calendar until you invite it to speak and negotiate a truce with your habits. There is dignity in naming the exact place you lied to yourself, because precision is anesthesia for fear and ballast for repair. Forgiveness is not amnesia. It is memory disciplined by mercy, which refuses to let the worst moment become the whole biography. When you take responsibility, fate looks less like a tyrant and more like a collaborator who finally received your revised draft. Pain integrated becomes a lens rather than a cage, and through that lens, you recognize the faces you once misread as enemies. The strongest people you admire are not unbroken. They are practiced at rebuilding, and their blueprints include room for setbacks. Suffering without meaning hardens, suffering with meaning sanctifies, and the difference is the conversation you dare to start. Begin that conversation tonight, privately, with words that tremble, because shaking voices often carry the truest cargo. Keep close. The next turn asks you to leap where maps blur, and the leap will reveal the ground you wanted proof for in advance. Faith is not certainty's twin. It is courage's cousin, a willingness to step when the floor is still drafting its plan beneath you. Kierkegaard called it a leap for a reason, because calculation cannot cross certain chasms, and arithmetic grows shy near eternity. Skepticism can be noble, but when it becomes your only diet, your bones of wonder grow brittle, and awe struggles to remember your name. Jung speaks of symbols that speak us, images that do not ask permission, arriving like weather to irrigate a dry interior province. Let silence become sacramental, a daily small chapel where attention kneels, and the ordinary discloses its secret gloss of holiness. You need not prove God to practice gratitude, nor diagram transcendence to honor conscience, meaning often visits before credentials. When you pray, if you pray, let honesty lead. Abandon the stage monologue and risk the clumsy truth you would never post online. Dostoevsky knew how grace finds criminals and cynics, not to excuse them, but to awaken the deeper law written under their scars. You can live as if nothing is sacred, but notice how your language still whispers reverence when your child sleeps or your friend weeps. The leap will not flatter you, it will fracture you along false lines, then set you with gentler glue, and your seams will shine in light. Practice small acts of faithfulness that feel embarrassingly modest, because great cathedrals are built from humble hours mortared well. You will be tempted to outsource transcendence to aesthetics, but beauty without surrender is only theater with expensive curtains. If you cannot kneel, then stand with reverence. If you cannot believe, then behave with integrity. Often posture tutors posture. Quick check, whispered like a friend at the threshold. Is this resonating for you so far, and shall we keep descending toward the marrow? Hold whatever answer rose in you, because the next stretch will move from heaven's altitude to the rough ground of your daily hours. Time does not pass, we pass through time, and our passage shapes us, like stones rounded by a river that never brags about its patience. Your mornings are elections where either confusion or devotion wins, and the inaugurated ruler governs your attention until dusk. Rituals are the architecture of meaning, modest beams that hold the weight of days so your spirit is free to climb and repair. Build a wake-up that respects breath, light, and intention, not as perfection theater, but as permission to meet your life uncluttered. Guard the first and last 15 minutes like borders of a tender country, because invasions at dawn and dusk are how empires fall. Write something before you read everything, or you will become an echo with excellent taste, applauding rooms you never helped construct. Choose one discipline that feels slightly heavier than comfort and carry it daily until it turns into a staff rather than a burden. Train your attention like a shepherd dog. Call it back gently, reward its return, and let it rest by the door when storms pass. Batch your trivialities with mercy, then honor your deep work with a closed door, because doors teach the world how to treat your soul. Move your body as a votive offering to vitality, not to worship mirrors, but to maintain the instrument that plays your one wild song. Plan less for control and more for clarity, mapping the few hills worth dying on, so your calendar stops dying on every hill. Let interruptions become invitations when appropriate, yet protect the hours where your highest vows are forged and tempered. Remember that boredom is not the enemy. It is the warm-up act for imagination, and heckling it only postpones the headliner. Design your days as if you respected your future self, because that self is already watching, and their gratitude will pay you back. Carry these practices forward, because next we will talk about death gently, and how mortality edits our priorities without cruelty. Memento Mori is not morbid. It is medicinal, a tonic that returns flavor to hours gone bland with sugar and spectacle. Imagine writing your eulogy yearly, not as vanity but as calibration, checking whether your calendar matches the story you claim. Death, contemplated, becomes a focusing lens, shrinking petty anxieties and enlarging the few loves that deserve cathedral space. You will not be remembered for being busy. You will be remembered for being brave, kind, and present when it would have been cheaper to vanish. Grief teaches fluency and finality, and that grammar helps you conjugate today's verbs with fewer lies and more luminous precision. We hoard nonsense because we fear endings, yet endings are compost for beginnings, and compost quietly saves entire gardens. Ask which possessions are actually obligations, which subscriptions are stealth tyrants, and which trophies are dust in expensive costumes. If an argument wouldn't matter on your last night, let it be small tonight, and let your dignity be the silence that ends it. Visit cemeteries as you would museums, letting humility guide you, and notice how equality finally speaks without needing slogans. Mortality does not ask permission, it asks participation, inviting you to spend attention like gold rather than like confetti in wind. Say the necessary "I love you" while throats are warm, and apologize while eyes can answer, because ghosts make poor conversationalists. Choose a legacy of repaired thresholds, fewer slammed doors, more lamps in windows, more chairs pulled out for late arrivals. Let your calendar include Sabbaths that do not apologize, because rest is rehearsal for eternity's unhurried music. If this sounds heavy, notice the lightness that enters when pretending stops, because truth travels lighter than denial in any weather. Carry that light forward, because now we turn toward community and courage, where your voice must risk itself among other voices. Community is not crowd, it is covenant, a circle where truth is safer than performance and belonging grows on the branches of honesty. Speak first person and present tense when you confess, because distance is anesthesia for responsibility, and you need feeling to heal. Let friendship become a practice of mutual unveiling, slow enough for trust to stretch without tearing, brave enough to mean transformation. Apologize with verbs rather than adjectives, changing habits that hurt instead of composing ornate speeches that leave wounds unchanged. Refuse contempt like you refuse poison, even when you disagree, because contempt melts the bridges that curiosity still might cross. Offer help without staging a rescue, remembering that dignity thrives when agency remains in the hands it is meant to inhabit. Join or build small circles that meet to tell the truth without spectacle, where victories stay humble and failures are composted tenderly. Expect conflict and appoint grace as chairperson, letting fairness moderate and humor keep minutes, while everyone stays available for repair. Courage grows by coordinated small risks. The email sent, the boundary drawn, the yes to service, the no to flattery masquerading as duty. Notice who you become around certain people and adjust attendance accordingly, because character is a climate you partly choose. Practice hospitality that includes listening, because the quietest guest often carries the map the room has been misreading for months. Stand your ground without sharpening your tongue, and you will discover strength that neither begs nor bullies, but simply abides. If your story includes loneliness, remember many are rehearsing the same lines. Invite them to improvise hope with you on Tuesdays. Gentle check-in as promised. Is this still nourishing your courage? And do you want me to keep pressing where your heart nodded yes? Hold that quiet yes or no, because the next valley is the hardest one, integrating shadow and calling, so you stop outsourcing your authority. Integration is the art of ending civil war within yourself, allowing fierce parts to lay down arms and work under one wise banner. You have a moral imagination that needs exercise, not to police others, but to architect a life congruent enough to sleep in peacefully. Let values be verbs: build, bless, repair, steward, and let roles be flexible, so identity becomes a river with banks rather than a cage. Draft a personal rule of life with few lines and real teeth, a portable monastery that travels with you into meetings and storms. Name 3 non-negotiables that will embarrass you into greatness, because embarrassment is cheaper than regret and kinder than collapse. Choose mentors by their scars, more than their highlight reels, and watch how their realism teaches hope that does not need glitter. Treat your attention like farmland and rotate crops, resting fields before they turn to sand and asking beauty to graze there gently. Audit your inputs with tenderness and rigor, pruning sources that stunt your courage and cultivating voices that enlarge your duty. Build a stack of practices that can survive bad weather: sleep, prayer or reflection, movement, craft, so your soul keeps voltage. Quit one performance this month and replace it with one practice and document the difference in your evening's temperature. Let your shadow become staff, not saboteur, by giving it work. Vigilance against hypocrisy, humor against pride, empathy against haste. Design a future that resists spectacle. Fewer declarations, more quiet repairs, more dinners that end in laughter and unforced blessing. If you stumble, rehearse recovery rather than relapse, making the route back so familiar that shame gets bored and leaves early. Your authority grows when your actions rhyme with your words, and the rhyme scheme should be simple enough to hum in the dark. Keep walking. The road into the conclusion waits ahead, and it carries an invitation signed by your own name in steadier ink. You arrived here not for decoration but for decision, and decisions are doors that demand hands, not just thoughts standing politely nearby. If the soul is a house, tonight you found light switches you forgot, and their glow makes certain messes mercifully undeniable at last. Dostoevsky's gift is the courage to face the basement, and your gift in return is to climb those stairs without pretending there was no dust. Kierkegaard reminds you that choosing yourself is not narcissism, but necessity, because drifting is just surrender with better PR. Jung teaches that what you refuse will rule you, and what you integrate will serve you. And service is how strengths stop becoming tyrants. Your life will not be saved by one grand gesture, but by a liturgy of small fidelities, repeated even when applause is taking a holiday. Let love become actionable. Fewer speeches, more chairs pulled out, more patient ears, more repairs made before bitterness writes the script. Guard your mornings, redeem your evenings, and tithe your attention to the few fires that warm many, rather than to sparks that exhaust everything. Practice a simple rule. Begin before you believe you are ready, and keep beginning until beginning becomes the quiet muscle of your days. Honor your body as the workshop of courage, and let rest be part of bravery, because exhausted heroes make careless promises and brittle choices. Refuse the counterfeit of endless novelty, and choose the generative discomfort of depth, where repetition slowly turns effort into ease. Confess quickly, forgive steadily, and amend concretely, because character is just memory arranged into habits that can survive storms. Let death's reminder sweeten your priorities, and let time's river carry away the props you no longer need for scenes you will not replay. Write your vows in present tense, and keep them when no one is clapping, because that is where authority grows roots thick enough for winter. When fear speaks, thank it for the warning, and proceed with devotion, since courage is fear that learned the right direction to walk. If loneliness visits, set an extra place at the table and invite someone into your imperfect evening, because shared light multiplies quietly. Remember, no algorithm knows your hunger like your soul does, and your soul keeps asking for meaning, not metrics, and wonder, not noise. Choose today one act, one boundary, one repair, and let momentum gather like kindling that finally decides to become a steady flame. Before you lose your soul, lose your alibi. Step into the life that costs you truth and pays you freedom, and do not invoice the world for applause. Now tell me, where are you watching from? What did this wake or heal in you, and will you walk with me into the next chapter? Subscribe, stay close, and let the next video keep your courage company tonight.